And good evening and welcome to Ladies Can We Talk. This is Debbie Georgatos, your host for the next 2 hours. We have a great and full packed show to go. And this opening segment, I call the Speak Up for America segment. I want to talk, the show largely or basically is dedicated to the idea that every generation has the job to preserve the exceptional, unique nature of America. And this is our generation, it's our time, and there are a lot of wonderful things about America that we can lose if we don't focus on them and hold on to them. Well, one of them is freedom of speech. And not just freedom of speech, but freedom to explore ideas, to talk to each other, to have the right to meet and gather and speak about ideas. We're going to talk later in the show about what's happening with the Trump protesters in California, how they are trying to essentially block him from being able to talk. We're going to talk a little later in this segment about the protests in California against the idea of climate change, that the basic notion that climate skeptics were going to be criminally prosecuted, think tanks and organizations under a bill in California. And also we're going to talk a little later about what happened to Lieutenant General Jerry Boykin, where his invitation to speak at a prayer breakfast at an Army base, Fort Riley in Kansas, was withdrawn because of the opposition of just virulently radical anti-Christian group, and essentially is pretty much one person. So we're going to talk about how speech is being squelched in this country. And it's really a bedrock idea that keeps us free to share ideas, understand ideas, listen to the other guy. But a big story that happened in Texas this week, and I want to focus on this in our Speak Up for America segment, has to do with a gentleman named John Guandola. And honestly, I don't think I'd heard of him before this past week. But he has kind of an amazing life story. He is a former special... He was in the Marines. I think he went to West Point. He was in the Marines. He's a special ops guy. He's he served the country valiantly. He then went on to work in the FBI. He worked there for a while. What he does now is he goes around the country and tries to speak to people about the dangers, the threat of radical Islam. He tries to expose what the agenda of this radical Islamist is and how we can watch for it and protect ourselves against it. So it's a really, I think, a vital thing he does. So he had an appointment. He had an event set in Texas, and that event was going to be held at a college at Cedar Valley College in Lancaster, Texas. And the event was set, and it was canceled by the college because of a letter sent by an organization called CAIR. And you've probably all heard of CAIR, C-A-I-R, and it is the CAIR is the Council on American Islamic Relations. But why this matters so much is this: CAIR itself was an unindicted co-conspirator in the Holy Land trial. CAIR is essentially arms locked with Hamas, a terrorist organization. We're going to talk more about CAIR in a moment because they're a front group. They make it sound like they are the, community organization to try to spread understanding of Islam. They're not. They're connected to Hamas. But back to John Guandola. He wanted to give this speech at a college. People wanted to attend, but because one organization, CAIR, raised a protest, the college canceled his speech. Fortunately for him, he found another place to give this talk this past week, and he did go ahead and give it. But CAIR is following him around the country, and every time he has a speech set up, CAIR challenges him. And they don't just write a polite letter and say, "Would you please cancel?" They use words, they label him with things like notorious Islamophobe, conspiracy theorist. They describe him in such ugly terms that everybody who receives that letter thinks, well, I don't want to be part of that. I mean, if he's really a notorious Islamophobe, if he's really making things up, I don't want to do that. So they cancel him. And the reason this matters is this: if you don't want America to become the next Brussels, Paris, what's happening in London, what's happening in Sweden, you need to understand that this effort by CAIR and other organizations on the left to shut down America's connection with the truth about the dangers spread by radical Islam, you need to be alert to it and recognize it and recognize that you are being told you're not allowed to hear other Americans speak. We'll tell you what you can hear. Related to that, and this threat to the freedom of speech has to do with something that most unfortunately happened this past week. Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and Microsoft agreed to comply with the hate speech standards put out by the EU, the European Union. So last week, a sweet woman who grew up in Sweden, who was upset with the fact that there have been so many refugees coming to Sweden, that's gone from being one of the safest countries in the world to having the second highest incidence of rape in the world. So she put a video out explaining what happened to her home, her home country, what the threat was, how her country has changed because of the massive influx. The numbers were extraordinary. The country of Sweden only has 9.5 million people. And in 2015, 163,000 asylum keepers, that's about a tenth of the population of the country, came to Sweden. Same number expected for next year. So this idea, so she put this YouTube out, and Facebook took it down. Folks, we have to have freedom of speech to share the truth and fight back when you see anyone challenging freedom of speech. Come back after our break. I'm going to finish more on this subject and then tune into something else amazing after the break.